Hello and welcome to Back to Britpop. It's me, Chris. On this episode, I'm delighted to be joined by Marc Shearer of the band Octopus. Octopus were formed in 1993 and was signed to Food Records. They released 4 singles and the album From A to B in 96. It's a really fantastic and candid interview with Marc. He goes into great detail about his experiences of being in the band and just being in the music industry through the 90s and all the highs and lows of the era. I think you're going to really enjoy it. As per the norm, I'll be back at the end of the interview to talk about all the ways that you can support the podcast. But in the meantime, here's Marc. Welcome to the podcast, Marc Shearer. How are you?
I'm fantastic, Chris. How are you?
Yeah, not too bad. I don't know what it's like at your end, but weather-wise, it's been an atrocious bank holiday Monday here in Southampton.
Obviously, I'm up in the Lake District and it rains all the time here anyway, so it doesn't matter. But Southampton,
yeah.
Jeez, Chris, I remember Southampton.
Oh, good.
Your podcast is great, by the way. Just we were setting things up there and saying that your podcast is fantastic, and it's really taken me back to after not being interested in all that stuff, and then it comes back to you, doesn't it? And your podcast has been great, and then obviously I know you're from Southampton. I don't know you, Chris, but I know you're from Southampton, and obviously you think of joiners and stuff like that. It's great.
The joiners is still hanging in there, which is great for us. And I know they've struggled like every venue, and they've always struggled. And we were lucky enough to play there a lot in my band, and it was the holy grail, for Southampton. And you just knew that once you were up on that stage, you were sharing, the stage with so many great, fantastic bands that graced the stage at the joiners.
I remember it, and I can't say that about all the gigs, but I remember the joiners, and it was good gig. And then what was the other one we played somewhere with
the Guildhall, Southampton Guildhall potentially.
Yes, the Guildhall with probably, was that maybe with Sleeper or with
Sleeper? Well, they both played there. I know definitely Sleeper did, but because I didn't make the gig, which I was gutted about.
Maybe Long Pigs. I think it was long we played the Guildhall with Long Pigs when they were hitting it. Yeah. We did a tour with them, and we did a tour with Sleeper as well.
Yeah.
And but yeah, so I mean, I'm just assuming, Chris, that I am going to be the least known name on your podcast, because that's what I was thinking about when I saw your podcast and all this stuff. I thought, wow, we were there but not there, and maybe that's the angle for this story, Chris.
Absolutely. Okay, in terms of how you met and how you got together and things, what was kind of the early seed of the band then?
I come from a sort of musical family, more in that my father's a massive record collector, and was in bands. He was the only unsigned band ever to appear on The Best of the Test, which was the old Grey Whistle Test TV program, which was just great. And he was always in bands and stuff. And they never really made, they were hanging around like with Midge Ure from Ultravox in Glasgow studios and things like that. And they never ever quite made it. And they were great. They were called Zoom Lens, and they were phenomenally good. Kind of electro, post-punk, electro-y stuff. It was brilliant. It was really, really good. But he's my primary influence, without a doubt. I mean, I grew up in a house where he was literally buying, I don't know how many records a week, and he had, this is, we're talking late 70s, early 80s here, and he's bringing back everything, and continued to do so up into the 80s, and well, he still does now. But so, I mean, my influences were massive. I mean, my first record I bought was like late period Sex Pistols because it had a cartoon cover.
Yeah.
But I actually have massive gaps in my record collection from that time, because my dad was buying it all. So I mean, literally everything from, Sex Pistols and all that to like, I mean, he was playing. He's an old kind of prog rock guy, but he listened to punk and post punk and electro, and So one minute I'm listening to Van de Graaff Generator, then we're listening to Wire, and then we're listening to Kraftwerk, who were massive in the household. I mean, I'm such a Kraftwerk head. I mean, they are without doubt one of my favorite bands. A lot of people come to music through a big brother or a big sister or whatever. My dad's really young. He was a young dad. There was so much that he was still excited about, and that I was getting excited about. We're listening to Zang Tum Tum records in the 80s, and Grace Jones and Frankie Goes to Hollywood were massive when I was about 10 or whatever it was,
Yeah.
And I don't have any of those. I don't have those Frankie Goes to Hollywood records, because my dad bought, I honestly think he's got something like 8 12-inch remixes of Relax and Two Tribes and stuff. I don't have them because he was buying them,
Yeah.
I was in the school orchestra I played saxophone badly, and that's where I met some of the guys in the band as well. And we went to this school trip, as you do, and I hung out with the older kids. I was maybe in, whatever year, and the sixth form kids were in another room, and I could hear the music, and I thought, oh, that sounds good. And it was the Smiths.
Yeah.
And I came home that weekend, and I said to my dad, I said, oh yeah, I heard this really cool band over the weekend, that you probably don't know. And he said, oh yeah, who's that? I said, there's a band called the Smiths. And he went, oh yeah, the bottom cupboard there, about a third in. I've got Hatfield Hollow and Gatefold. If you want it, take it. I don't listen to it. And I was just like, man, you just cannot be this guy. But it was great. So when I started getting into stuff, I suppose, I don't know, I went through a miniature goth phase that lasted about 4 months or something, and I got into psychedelic music. And then at this point, I met some of the guys from the band, Stephen McSeveny and his younger brother, Alan McSeveny. And we would jam and play stuff on the 4-track. And I learned to play guitar pretty late, I suppose, but I got a 4-track, literally 2 months after I got a guitar. So that was bad for my guitar technique, because what I couldn't play, I would just sort of play half and then overdub the other bit. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. I've been there.
Yeah, it hampers your technique, doesn't it? That's my excuse, and I'm sticking to it, So I went really deep into 4-track. But the thing is, again, the stuff I was listening to, at one point I had about, that phase, right? That phase when you've got like 15 records. And those 15 records are your world, and that's why those records mean so much to you. A couple of them were the Smiths, The Cure. I love The Cure. Who doesn't love The Cure? The Smiths, The Cure. I think The Mission, very uncool, but I don't care. The Cult, again, that was when you're 14, that was fine. And, all that stuff. And Bert Jansch. And I remember listening to Bert Jansch, and the school music teacher was throwing them out, and I liked to look at the cover. And I took it home, and at first I thought, oh yeah, this folky hi stuff. But the guitar playing was amazing. And I remember making this point to all the guys who would be in the band pretty soon, saying, listen to this, guys, this is amazing, this guy, Bert Jansch. And they were like, oh, this is folky rubbish, what is this? I said, no, come on, listen, it reminds me of Johnny Marr. And they were going, oh, don't be stupid, And of course, years later, I was proved to be right, innit? I mean, it was like, I love it. I just love it so much. So I'm just a music head. I mean, Octopus is named after a Syd Barrett song, the first single he released after he left Pink Floyd. We were heavily into the psychedelic thing, big time. And I loved all that other stuff as well that led me down all those, like, anti-Tinkle Tops, Magic Teapot kind of English psychedelia stuff. I loved all that. But I suppose contemporary stuff, that the band that made it for me was My Bloody Valentine. And I just went crazy for them. I literally lay on the floor with my head between the speakers for days listening to that record. I think the big thing that happened was I went away to university up in Dundee, and the guys stayed back, and some of them in Glasgow, and I just wrote loads of songs in 4-track and played saxophone through a wah-wah. I was really into John Coltrane, and I used to, in Van de Graaff Generator, so I used to play these. I just used to stay at home and put my saxophone through a wah pedal and play along with John Coltrane. Van de Graaff Generator, and just not go to university for days, which is pretty bad. But and then I came back, and all the guys had been in a cover band, what they called Ciccone Youth, Ciccone Riot, something like that, and they were doing covers of like Pink Floyd and the Ramones, and I filmed them at the Henderson Theatre in shots. We lived in a town right in the middle between Glasgow and Edinburgh, but I had been up north at Dundee, came back, I was studying law up there, and I came back to do my postgraduate and legal diploma. I don't know why, because I didn't go on to become a lawyer. I qualified, but just, my head was full of music, basically. I came back and formed a band with these guys I basically stole the cover band, as it were, and said, well, look, I've got these songs, and they were like, wow, these are pretty good. I was really into Smile at the time by, the Beach Boys. I wrote this song where I couldn't play piano very well. And you know how Brian Wilson obviously is just genius in piano. And he does that really vamping sort of thing, and it's just so beautiful, and the horns and everything. And I wrote this song, and I remember I think it was for my finals, and I think I had a reset probably because I just scraped through. And it's probably European law, or it might have been tax law, because come on, who wants to do tax law? And I remember just taking a study break and picking up guitar and doing this kind of I was trying to write a Brian Wilson song, but I can't play piano. So I was playing these kind of high vamping chinking chords, and it turned into this song. And you know that idea when it writes itself.
Yeah.
And literally in that 15-minute study break, I had written Wait and See, which is not an amazing song, but to me, it was the first song that I wrote that really felt like I'd written a song. Again, I was into, really luckily, because my dad had the originals of the albums, was Nick Drake. I've been listening to Nick Drake since I was like 12 or something, you know? I mean, I love Nick Drake. And then he became really popular. I was like, yeah, he's great. He's amazing.
Yeah.
And,
Well, this thing with Nick Drake with me was that I was well into singer-songwriters for a long period of time. And I hadn't got into Nick Drake. And then someone said, well, stop listening to this, what you're listening to. And because this is this is an imitation of the man, you know, you need to get on to Pink Moon. And I sort of, where have I been? This is ridiculous. I'm listening to all these guys that are just, emulating what was and a fantastic record. Yeah.
Isn't it? And it's funny how, with certain records, I remember moments like that. I remember, for all I was saying, my dad's a big influence. He didn't do that, listen to this, son, kind of thing. He let you find it yourself. Yeah. I would ask, I think I just saw the cover and I said, what's that? And he said, oh, that's big, I actually remember it sitting on the dining room table. You know how you don't forget those moments? I don't know, where was it? I was talking about meeting up with Stephen and Alan and Bob Holmes was a drummer, lovely guy, Bob. And I just started with these songs and Wait and See, just everybody just kind of looked at me and went, whoa, that's a song, isn't it? And it stole the Nick Drake chords from Joey in the chorus, which I didn't realize. It's just like an A minor seventh and up it goes. And that was it. I just thought, this is a real song. And the songs just kept coming, and we started playing her in Glasgow. We were talking about just before we started, the Joiners in Southampton. Well, Nice and Sleazy in Glasgow for us, run by Mig. Who was a great guy, used to just put us on like good band bills. And then he would start to say, well, do you want to support this band that are coming through? So a real big shout out to Mig for putting us on. He saw something in us. And again, remember, as I said, I came down pretty late. I'm finishing university and I'm just writing these songs. And I'm thinking, well, I had a legal traineeship set up and stuff like this. And and then, I don't know, it just all happened so fast. We probably only played in Glasgow for about a year, but we played, twice a month, 3 times a month in that year. Do you know what I mean? And we were literally making leaps and bounds. I mean, if you wanted to be cruel, you would say, well, you guys can hardly play, but you could also say, but whoa, you're writing these pretty good songs. And we had a sound, and we were doing stuff that was, one minute we were doing like Brian Wilson, rinky dink style pop tunes. The next minute we were doing like 8-minute long kind of space jams in drop D tuning, so we didn't have a signature sound.
When you were rehearsing and like coming together as a band, were there moments when, and I often ask this in the podcast, were there moments when you were kind of looking at each other, and I guess you were coming with songs as well, and you were on a bit of a writing marathon, I guess, in some ways. And was there moments where you were thinking, okay, this is starting to work, this is fitting now, we're starting to sound like, Octopus? Yeah,
definitely. Although, I mean, yes and no. I mean, I think one of the reasons we never went on was, well, there's a million reasons, isn't it? It's all those beautiful pieces of the jigsaw puzzle that need to coalesce, don't they? Really, but or to have that one song, which we didn't quite have. I mean, you're right. There'd be moments where I would bring a song in, and we'd either just nail it, and I'd go, it goes like this. You play that, you play this. Play around with it if you want, but I'm hearing this, this, and this. And everybody was pretty happy because it did sound good. It sounded pop. And I like pop. It was not a dirty word. Remember, in Glasgow at the time, everybody wanted to be Slint, and it was the American thing. Glasgow was pretending it was Chicago at the time. And of course, we got absolutely slated for singing an English accent. But I mean, what was I listening to? I'm named after Mark Bolan. My dad named me after Mark Bolan with a C. I'm listening to Sid Barrett. We've named the band after Sid Barrett. I'm listening to Julian Cope. We've already talked about Nick Drake. I'm listening to Soft Machine and Robert Wyatt, and people are saying, oh, you're singing an English accent. Well, there's a surprise. And yet, for some reason, it's all right for the Glasgow bands to, I didn't realise that Primal Scream were from Memphis.
Well, this is it. You see, this is the fine line.
From Los Angeles. But that's all right. But as soon as we start singing in English, way, hey, hey, but that's what happens, isn't it? Once we got there, as a band I was really into at the time called Levitation, who was Terry Bickers' band after he'd left House of Love. Do you remember? Yeah, so I mean, obviously I liked House of Love or whatever, but they split up, and then this new band, and of course it was right up my street because we'd already been ploughing this sort of psychedelic furrow, we're into all that stuff. I remember we went to the roller coaster tour primarily to see My Bloody Valentine. It was My Bloody Valentine, Jesus Mary Chain, Dinosaur Jr. and Blur. And I remember thinking, Blur? What are they doing? And we watched that gig, the Glasgow SAC, myself, Stephen and Alan. I think Bob was probably there as well. And I remember turning to Stephen and going, oh my God, they're into Sid Barrett. So I remember people saying, oh, you're just copying Blur. And well, I understand that. But to be fair, we were totally into that whole psychedelic thing and had been for a few years before we'd even heard Blur. I think I'd heard them do There's No Other Way or something like that. And that was fine. It was a kind of baggy thing. It was all right. And I thought they were great. And I still do. I think they're fantastic. But again, that's one of the reasons why we never made it. Because if you're coming up at a time where you've got Super Furry Animals and Blur, who pretty much are my favourite Britpop bands. I really liked Oasis when they first came out. I thought it sounded so fresh, and I just laughed at the T-Rex rip-offs and stuff and thought, this is funny, and Liam looked great. And, but I tired pretty quickly with Oasis. But I think Super Furries and Blur, just great. I mean, what a great band. And of course, we were probably somewhere in the middle, but not as good as either, so we were scuppered.
But in terms of getting a live following, though, into back home, before you kind of made the jump to London to sort of pursue, well, the record deal and you were signed and then you moved. Is that right? Or was it the other way around?
Yeah, well, I mean, so what happened was we were playing in Glasgow a lot. We were starting to get a bit of a following. But again, this is all within a year. So it's not as if we'd been playing for years and like, oh, yeah, they finally, no, this literally happened in a year. I was mentioning Levitation. I went to see them live. I loved them. They were supporting the Sugar Cubes, who I also love. Bjork, I just love Bjork, still do. And I went to the toilets in the Barrowland and I saw this guy from Levitation. I went, hey, how you doing? And I said, yeah, I'm actually here. I love Sugar Cubes, but I'm here to see you guys as much as I am them. I just love Levitation, great band. And he said, oh, come and have a chat. So the next day, I didn't even realize I was standing beside the, the backstage, but he takes me and introduces me to all the guys in the band and gave me a beer. And of course, I'm loving it, this is the band that I really like. And he said, hey, do you want to, we're playing in King Tut's in a couple of weeks. I said, I know. He said, oh, we'll put you on the guest list. I already had a ticket, but I took the guest list anyway, and I had a tape in my pocket and I gave him a tape and I said, here's a tape. And of course, it's not what you think. It was not a tape of Octopus. It was a tape that I had made up to give to Stephen, Minkus, as he's known, bass player in Octopus. And it was full of Kraftwerk, Eamon Dool, Noia. Basically, one side was krautrock, and the other side was ambient stuff, Aphex Twin, Brian Eno, just the Orb, all the stuff that we loved.
Yeah.
And it was a tape for him. And of course, they read out and they were like, wow, this is a great tape. I made up friends with Dave, and this is pre-internet, really. This is just pre-internet. So there was phone calls and letters and tapes exchanged and stuff like that. And after a couple of months, he said, how come you know so much about music, but you're not in a band?
Yeah.
Of course, I wasn't a band. I was just too nervous to tell him.
Yeah.
So this whole idea of passing on a tape, it wasn't my tape. It was a compilation, it was a mixtape. And I said, well, I am in a band, really. And he was like, I'd love to hear some stuff. I was like, yeah. And we'd only done some 4 tracks and maybe one session in Glasgow. And I said, okay, I'll send you it. So I sent him some stuff, and on it was a song Saved. And he got back saying, did you write that? And I said, yeah, I wrote it. But did you write it? I said, of course I wrote it. And he said, it's the best song I've heard in ages. I want to produce it and blah, blah, blah. So Dave became our manager, a guy called Dave Francolini. He was a drummer in Levitation. And at the time, Dave and I it was just a wonderful friendship and the whole thing, and he was connected in London. He was living down in London, and he was very much in and around what was going on,
Yeah.
So he was really a connection. He was the guy that got us signed.
I mean, did you get like A&R interest, or was there like a period of time where you were getting contacted from quite a
Yeah, I
few
mean,
from a few labels.
we already had interest in Glasgow anyway, and with people like Meg putting us on and Fiona Shepherd writing about us, it's only a matter of time. I mean, if you want to look at it another way, when Dave introduced us, we jumped at it, and he took us to. There was loads of A&R people. There was about 5 labels trying to sign us at the time, and of course, I made the mistake of signing with Parlophone because this hindsight's a wonderful thing.
Yeah.
But I was such a Beatles fan, I mean, proper. I had the 24 cassettes of bootlegs and the 19 versions of Strawberry Fields and all the George Harrison outtakes, and I was such a Beatles fan. And Parlophone, come on, what are you going to do? You get a chance to send to Parlophone, Food, Parlophone, EMI. And I was such a Kate Bush fan and such a Kraftwerk fan and Talk fan. And I was just going, imagine being in the same level as those guys. That's just nuts. So unfortunately, I let that kind of take over when really what I should have done was go with a label that was more matched to our ability at the time. I mean, we were just, these are the first songs I'd ever written, and here they're talk of them being signed, recorded, and put on a record, which is fine. And of course, you go to the bottom of the pile in EMI. I remember going into EMI building, it was so exciting, and someone was like, "Who are you?" And I said, "I'm Mark from Octopus." And, right, you know what I mean? Whereas if it's signed at a smaller label, they would have wanted to make you work. EMI didn't really care if we worked or not, really. I mean, Andy was great. Mike Smith was fantastic. I mean, there was a lot of great people who really, really helped us out there. And
so, in terms of the process of recording that album, then did you feel that it was you being maybe potentially treated slightly differently at that time, or were you just going well and truly with the flow at this point?
Well, I mean, up in Glasgow, we'd done things like Isabel Campbell, who went on to play with Belle and Sebastian. In fact, I was in a taxi with her the night she met the guy and formed Belle and Sebastian. She was talking about it, saying, "Oh, I've met this guy, going to do some stuff." She was playing cello with us at the time to try and all the stuff we'd been recording up there was quite freeform, and and we had Bob on drums, we had Lawrence Wedlock on trumpet, Jim Donaldson on trumpet, Effie Fenton on flute. So we were quite freeform. And when we signed with EMI, Andy didn't say anything. I later found out that really what Andy likes is power pop. So he loved songs like, we did songs like Magazine and stuff, which were like, 2.5 minutes of, teen angst, guitar pop,
Yeah.
And I like a bit of that, but it's not where my heart is really. But I'd realised it's where Andy's heart is. He loves that stuff. Is it Bob Hund is his favourite band from there, and of course Blur cater to that taste for him as well, don't they? I mean, they did the fair share of that spiky guitar, post-punk guitar noise that Andy really loves. And yeah, I love that as well, but it's not what I was really writing, But I have to be honest and say they didn't really put any pressure on us until the second album. First album, they just let us. I kind of wish they had put pressure on us for the first album, because the first album, thanks to Dave, I mean, the deal pretty much was he got us the record deal, and we would let him produce it, and I was happy to do that. You could maybe say, well, maybe you should have taken someone with more experience. It felt right at the time, so it's all good, they were really just extensions of my demos. They were in fact, Your Smile was recorded in Sawmills, and we went to Sawmills because of the Dukes of Stratosphere XTC. That's why we went there. We later found out that Oasis had gone there. But we went there, and they really were just fancy recordings of my demos. We would play the demo and then go, right, let's go. In fact, so much so, Your Smile, which was a pretty big song off that album, if I can say that. There's a guitar solo in it, which is actually me playing the guitar in my kitchen in Glasgow, on the 4-track, doing it, and it came to the point for Alan to learn the guitar solo. And he said, "What did you do?" I said, "I don't know. I just played something and did it backwards." And so we listened to it and realised that we were still in the same tempo. So the engineer just flew in my kitchen recording. So, and if you listen to the actual title track from A to B, it's a demo from a basement somewhere. And it's so badly done in one level, but it's so naive and, and another level that I quite liked. And so there was no pressure. Nobody listened to it and said, this is, some of it was, I'm not saying it didn't sound good. Some of it sounded great. And I have to say, bearing in mind that we were hardly virtuoso musicians, So sometimes I was just pleased for it to sound the way it did.
You touched on it earlier on about the second record and writing new material and things. Obviously, you would have been on the mad sort of the touring process for that record and the PR and everything else. But were you finding it quite difficult or under any pressure to keep writing and come up with ideas at that stage as well?
In a way, yes. The unfortunate thing was once that magical period of getting signed, going to Sawmills, doing all the recording, then going on tour. Once that had sort of subsided and I was listening to the record and I thought, okay, so here's our album. I didn't tell anybody at the time, but I didn't like it.
Oh God.
I mean, it's a bit of a shocker, but I certainly didn't say it at the time because how can you? You can't, looking back on it, I didn't realize how many bands had actually re-recorded the first album. What Oasis did it 3 times. Who was it? Somebody on your podcast recently was saying they re-recorded the whole thing again. I didn't know you could do that. I kind of wish we'd done that. And certainly as well, we went on tour. And of course, the irony is when we came off tour, we could then play. We learned so fast.
Yeah.
I mean, I've got some live tapes that are great, and you think, wow, we were actually all right on a good night. We were absolutely terrible at certain points as well. Obviously, who isn't? But I just felt I was promoting something that, and again, I realised that we were being put in with the Britpop thing, and we were at the end of it. There was a really funny story. Was what's the journalist's name? John Harris released a book, The Last Party, and it's about Britpop. You read it?
I know it, but I've not read it.
Right. So I saw it in a bookshop and I thought, oh yeah, and it's a fairly decent sized thing. So I thought, and your vanity kicks in and you go, I wonder. And I looked at the, I looked at the back to see under oh my God, we're in the book. We're in it because we get no press. Everybody hated us. The Scottish press hated us for leaving Glasgow and going to London. The London press hated us because, I don't know, we just arrived without anybody ever having heard of us, and here we were on EMI. Do you know what I mean? With no press, nothing. It's just unfortunate. You can see why. I understand it, but at the time it was like, what have we done? And so I look at John Harris's book. I go, wow, he mentioned it. So I get it, page 479, and he says, this really was the arse end of Britpop. There'd be a whole slew of bands like La 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 La, and it was just this list of also ran bands. I thought, okay, that's my entry in the
oh God,
in the Britpop story. But it was great. So second album, as I said, Andy was power pop. I was really into electronic stuff and also just epic stuff. When I look back on it, if we'd kept going, the next big thing would have been the whole thing was Flaming Lips and stuff like that. And I was basically writing. I was writing epic pop with big strings, drum loops. We had this song called Lose It, which I didn't realize was a Supergrass song because I don't think I'd even listened to the Supergrass album a year after it had been out. I don't know, but Lose It I'd written, and I just thought, finally, I've done it. I've written a pop single that is going to just be an absolute banger. Played it to friends. It was based on, believe it or not, a Soft Machine Sid Barrett sample, which makes it sound not poppy, but it was. And it was drum beats. It was almost, I don't listen to it very much, but I remember thinking last time listening, it was almost Happy Mondays-y in a strange way, but more electronic. It had a real loping, dancing feel, which nothing in the first album did. You couldn't dance to it. I remember turning up at a nightclub one time after a gig and the DJ thinking, oh, Octopus are here, put on Your Smile, and the dance floor cleared, which was pretty funny, but also indicative of the situation. You got to think of these things. Everything was mid-tempo, head nod, Sid Barrett, Beach Boys, So this stuff Lose It was an absolute banger. And I think this was the straw that broke the camel's back, to use a horrendous cliche. Played it to Andy and he went, And I thought, what do you mean? It's an absolute, the opening lines were buying petrol to see the country, right? It was a song ostensibly about environment, but all sorts of stuff. I was really proud of the lyrics. It was upbeat, it was danceable. Everybody I played it to just went, oh my God. And I was like, it's a banger, right? It's a banger. And we had Hugo Nicholson in line to produce it, who'd done Primal Screams, Higher Than the Sun, and stuff like that. And then we went with Marcus Draves because I'm such a Brian Eno head and Bjork head, and he'd worked with Brian Eno and Bjork. But I don't know what happened, but it just didn't happen. It was just bizarre. So it just all fell to bits quite quickly, with nobody being interested in the sort of new direction, which was dancey or just big epic songs.
Yeah.
2 years later, who comes along but Flaming Lips, and I just kind of pointed and went, sound familiar?
That knockback then, was that something that you were already sort of thinking, where am I going and what are we going to do here at that situation? Or would you kind of thought at that stage you were going to still persevere?
Yeah, it was just really weird. It was just like going into sludge, and I suppose, I don't know, I think as well, I was really keen. I mean, really, we're talking what, 96? The album came out, and by 96, Britpop really was, as a thing, really was out, wasn't it? And I suppose that's one of the downsides of being on Food, and associated with Blur and stuff like that. That you were up, and the stuff that we were making was not Britpop. It was, what was it? It was just dancey pop, psychedelic pop.
You weren't 100 miles away from, you said you talked about Super Furry Animals, but you were definitely in the same campsite as they were.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, they did it so well, and again, I was taking it. I remember, funnily enough, I used to run this night up in, we got a studio, and I turned it into like a nightclub as well and stuff like that. And through the late 90s and early 2000s, it was the scene of many great. I had the Libertines in my living room, Imitation Electric Piano, Hot Chip, all played in my living room. Fortet, Kieran DJ'd several times. But I remember Griff came because he was friends of some of the people who lived with me, and I used to see Griff quite a bit. It was always nice to see him. And I remember one night he said, and I just said to him, I said, Griff, I've got to get this over with, but I just love your band, man, because you kind of do the stuff that I've been doing, but you do it better. And he said, oh man, I listened to From A to B, and I don't know why I'm putting on this ridiculous accent, because he has such a wonderful accent. And he said it's such a brave album. And I remember being really, really pleased with that. And I thought, oh, that's really sweet, But actually, looking back, he may have been saying something else. He may have been saying, whoa, you put that out on EMI? So who knows, But that's where we went. And then we got dropped, and that was it. We were dropped because there were no 2.5-minute punk pop songs. We'd written a whole load of stuff. The thing is, unless there was an absolute bona fide international pop moment, which there probably wasn't, then I don't think it would have mattered what I'd written, to be honest, because I think we'd spent so much money with the first album, on the album cover with the pop-out sleeve, touring as an 8-piece band, going to Japan twice. We must have spent a fortune, just in hotels and travel and stuff alone. And obviously not making it back. I mean, what Saved got to number 40. Your Smile got to 42, and we used to meet this guy at these EMI sales conference things, and there was a big Scottish guy, and he used to say, I'm really sorry about Your Smile, big man. And I'd say, it's all right, 42 is not bad. We'll get higher with the next one, because it was all, sales conference. Yeah. Oh, I'm really sorry. And I go, that's fine. And then we'd go maybe 2 months later to another one, and I'd see this guy, big man, hey, I'm really sorry about Your Smile, And I think he may even have done it a third time at something. And I said to our manager at the time, I said, who is that guy, and why does he keep apologising? We've released 2 singles since then, Yeah. And he said, oh yeah, I didn't want to tell you. And I was like, what? He's like, well, he's in charge of distribution at EMI, and Your Smile wasn't in 50% of the shops in the first week of sale. So obviously that affected your
Jesus Christ.
So we got to 42, and it was only in half the shops. So again, I remember the band going, that means we would have got top 20. It's like, nah, it means it's never going to be. That's what it means.
Oh God. But you can tear yourself apart with that sort of thing, can't you?
You can, and it's pointless, I mean, that whole thing was just the whole, until the end, when you realise that actually, no, they just don't want you.
Did you find that other bands rallied around you and supported you? Was there kind of that network there?
No, not really. I mean, we got so little press that I don't think it would have mattered.
Yeah.
Anybody would have noticed it. There wasn't really. It was only ever the bands that we played with. I mean, we really were just on an absolute full-on Hard Day's Night. Beatles on repeat, roller coaster, and really riding it for all it was worth. And we were very insular because there was 8 of us. There was a big, and we weren't. I mean, there was the famous story of Space when we played with Space. And again, it's the bittersweet thing. Radio 1 wanted to interview me, and I thought, great, because we've got a single coming out and it's daytime Radio 1. What they really wanted to talk to me about was the fact that in fact, I think this was in Southampton, or was it Portsmouth, one of the unis, we supported Space. We'd been done 4 or 5 dates with them. Our keyboard player, Mike, had realised that there's a song in their set where the band goes off and Space's keyboard player does this big ravey thing with all these keyboards and stuff. And Mike said, he just plays a CD. And we were like, no, come on. And he's like, no, he plays a CD. He said, it's there in his keyboard rack. And so the last night of the tour, we thought it would be fun, talking about camaraderie, because we got on okay with them. We thought it'd be fun to put in the Octopus CD. So Mike put in the Octopus CD, and he cued it to the same track that they did, which I think was track 6 or whatever, right?
Yeah.
So he had it cued as exactly as he'd seen it done nights before. We all went up onto the balcony of this university gig. It was Portsmouth or Southampton, something like that. And I remember this guy coming up. I mean, somebody must have liked us, because I remember this guy coming up and going, hey, you're from Octopus, you've just played. That was amazing. I loved it. Oh, I was like, thanks. But just listen. And he's like, oh, yeah, you want to see the band? I was like, no, this might be quite funny. And lo and behold, the guy turned to me and went, that's Octopus. Because Octopus could come out the speakers. So we thought it was funny. The crowd are going, the keyboard player's obviously losing his mind. Mike left their CD there so he could find it. We went on the bus, and it was our tour manager Sasha's birthday. So we were drinking champagne on the bus, and the next thing, the bus is being hit, and there's Space outside there challenging us to a fight. So, I remember saying, where's your Scouse sense of humour? Come on, we were having a laugh. A laugh? That's not a laugh.
Yeah.
We thought, we thought it was funny. So
oh no,
so that was about the only camaraderie, and you just didn't see anybody. I mean, I think I had a couple of beers with Graham and the Good Mixer, like once or twice. I remember that. You never saw anybody. You just didn't see anybody. I remember meeting Brett Anderson. He was in the dressing room beside me in a stable. We were only separated by a curtain because it was a stable. That's how I could see him. I was like, oh, hello. And I remember speaking to him and saying, oh, we were in Japan with you, because we went to Japan. And he just looked at me, and I thought, all right, fair enough. Just trying to be nice.
Oh,
so,
dear.
I just didn't have the, I was such a bad networker as well. I just so sort of, for a loudmouth, I'm quite shy,
Do you see any kind of any chance of you guys getting back together for any kind of reunion show? Is that ship's well and truly sailed now?
I think it's well and truly sailed, and I think there's only a handful of songs that I would be happy to play, because some of those songs were written at 2:00 in the morning, started recording at 3 and finished maybe 2 days later, and that was it. Played for a couple of months. I don't know what those songs are anymore, except for a couple like Your Smile, which was a song I wrote for my friend Ron Mason in Glasgow. It really means a lot to me, because I was watching him. He's a solicitor, and we obviously trained together doing that, and he took that path and I took another path, and I was writing this song saying, look, I'm doing this and you're doing that, but we'll always be mates, and lo and behold, we are. And that's what Your Smile's about. It's easy to lose with every mile you smile. And so I would happily play that again. It's a good song. Saved is possibly my favorite. I'd happily play Saved again, because the lyrics are stolen from J.D. Salinger. Not all, just a couple of lines. The song was my attempt at doing a Cocteau Twins song during the Britpop era. When really I was thinking Cocteau Twins. I didn't know what Britpop was at the time. And I just love it. It's one of, one of the songs that I'm not embarrassed by. I think it's a good song. You know, for years I went past saying, "Oh, it's all rubbish. It's rubbish. I hate it. I hate it." Well, that's not true. There's a couple of lovely gems there. But it was great. It really was, Chris. It was absolutely fantastic. And again, all the people that helped, you know, that were there. Do you know what I mean? All the guys from Shots and the guys that helped us in Glasgow, and Dave, who really helped us early on. And, you know, it was just, it was great. You know, there's no way you can, you know, and I still do music. I still enjoy it. That's what I'm saying. So there's, you know, it's all good. It's all good.
Well, Mark, it's been an absolute pleasure speaking to you about Octopus and everything else in between. And it's really great to hear an insight of what happened to you and how it affected you, and
when it all goes wrong.
And the the candid way that you've spoken about it is amazing.
Chris, I really appreciate it. Thank you so much. That was absolutely lovely. Much appreciated. Cheers, Chris. Take care. Bye-bye.
Once again, massive thank you to Mark for joining me on the episode. It was a really interesting conversation about his experiences with Octopus through the 90s. He's been incredibly busy ever since, being involved in numerous musical projects, which is fantastic to see. If you want to follow me on social media, you can just search for Back to Britpop on Instagram, Facebook and Twitter. If you haven't yet rated the podcast or left a review, that is super helpful. So I'd really appreciate it if you could do that on any app that you're listening to the podcast on. Again, if you want to say thanks and buy me a coffee, you can do that as well. And the link to my Ko-Fi page is in the show notes. And you can just follow the link and do that if you want. And again, a massive thank you to everybody that listens every week. I'm really enjoying putting this season together, and getting guests is really hard sometimes, but well worth it. And I'm hope that we'll continue to do a few more episodes in this season and see how it goes. But thanks again for listening. Really appreciate it. Take care. Bye.